5 in the morning, and the daily routine has already begun. The Talib, pupils at the Koranic schools, wash in darkness. There's no electricity, no water, and the nearest well is about 100 meters from the school. The day begins immediately with prayers and the recital of verses from the Koran. The students will read them hundreds, if not thousands of times, to try and commit them to memory. The first recitals of the day end. It's 6 in the morning and time for the talibes to head out to beg. Begging is recommended in the holy texts as a means of learning humility. Before leaving at dawn, they shake hands as a sign of peace with this man, their religious instructor, known in Senegal as a marabout. His name is Ibrahim. Each child chooses a bowl, which they will use to beg, to collect donations of money or food. They leave while the town is still sleeping. Take your tins and line up in twos. Who do you usually pair up with? Sora, who are you with? Ames, go with Modu. So, where are you? I'm going with El Hajj. With who? All right, so who's left? Modu, you'll go on your own then. The children in Ibrahim's school, which is called a Dara, will hook up with hundreds of other talibes who make their way into the center of town to beg or look for odd jobs. The youngest are barely 5 years old. They will spend several years at the Koranic school, often not leaving until they reach adolescence. This is the city of Mbour in Senegal, where everything revolves around the port. I came here in April, during the dry season. I was following up a story about a stolen boat and ended up on this particular stretch of the Senegalese coast almost by chance. Mbour is about 80 kilometers south of Dakar, the capital. It's a vibrant, busy fishing port, the second largest in the country. The scene at the port is hectic as the canoes head out to sea, usually for no more than a day or two. Mbour is twinned with the port town of Concarneau in Brittany, which donated the ice factory, and it even observes the typical celebration of Breton culture, the filet bleu. But that was not what interested me. No, what interested me was neither the abundance of fish nor the traditional methods of fishing, but the kids. The thousands of kids who sometimes don't see their parents for years on end. These kids dressed in rags who beg or work doing the most menial jobs available at the port. The number of talibes is steadily rising, not just in Senegal but throughout Western Africa. But it's here in Mbour that it seems to be most blatant and most worrying. And it's here I wanted to see how the students live. The boys are not happy about being filmed. Occasionally they're openly hostile. And they always want money or food in exchange. All these kids are Talibs. Most of these children are not originally from the coast. Some even come from neighboring countries. The Talibs are a close-knit little gang in which the kids look out for each other. They beg in Mbour because the port is comparatively wealthy compared to the countryside. In most Daras, the teacher has given the kids a minimum amount of cash to bring back. If they fail, they risk being severely punished. Where are you from? Guinea. Guinea. He's from Guinea. He's a Guinean. Can you remember your father? Have you seen your father? No. He doesn't know. He doesn't know his dad. He's never seen his dad ever since he's been here. I've hired a guide with whom I walk through the small streets near the port. His name is Babacar. In the evening, when they get back home to the Koranic school, they have to bring something. Everyone brings something. Money, food, sugar. Each little Talib has to bring his marabouts at least 150 francs. Their parents are still in villages in the interior. As they can't afford to look after them, they prefer to hand them over to the teachers of the Koran so they can be educated. But not all the teachers give the children a good education. Some of the kids spend all day out in the streets begging. Sometimes they even steal to get enough. How much do you have to bring back each day? 500 francs. Otherwise they'll beat them up. The marabout's behavior doesn't seem to upset anyone. Indeed, the majority of Senegalese seem to accept it. He says the system of the Talibs is a good system. Does he think the children should go out begging? Yes, he says he does. The fact they beg isn't a problem, as the school teacher can't provide everything for them on his own. Begging pays for all the food and the clothes and their medical care. If they didn't need to beg, they wouldn't be in the streets. They'd be at school studying the Koran, like other kids. Ibrahim's Dara is in an abandoned construction site close to the beach and a couple of kilometers from the port. I went there often and always unannounced, but was at all times given a warm welcome by Ibrahim and his assistants. Throughout the day, the children alternate between learning the Koran and begging. To be precise, it's 9 hours of Koran and 8 hours of begging. Most of the time, the kids are dizzy from lack of sleep. How old is he? He's 20. He says it's his father who owns the Dara. When his father's away, he takes over. He fills in. All these kids are children that have been confided to his dad. The people put their sons in his care to be educated, and they haven't paid anything. He says he doesn't get any money for doing this. So how does he manage then? Well, he says he shares what the kids get when they go out begging. Can we visit the school, please? All right. Sorry, not so fast. This is where the children sleep. What's happened to him? He had a wound, and it got infected. And what about that boy? He's got stomachache. Well, why isn't this boy in hospital? He says he hasn't the money to take him there. Do the little Talibs sometimes die here? Not often. Some do, but not often. In this school, the children learn the Koran and nothing but the Koran. They don't understand the meaning of the words they are reciting. The Marabout simply asks they memorize the words that are on their boards. The actual meaning will be taught to them much later. After many years at school, the Talibs are meant to be able to recite the entire holy book from start to finish. It's what's known as doing the Kamil. There are those who cannot recite it by heart in just one day, but there are others who are very clever. They start in the morning and by night time they're finished. How long does it take for them to learn the Kamil, to recite the Koran?
6 ans.
A clever child can learn to do it in 6 years. What we study here is completely different from schools in the West. Every day, Ibrahim checks on his pupils' progress. They're meant to be able to recite the phrases on their tablets faultlessly, or cite verses from the Koran off by heart. Those who hesitate or get it wrong better watch out. Go on, get out. Go and get your bowls. There are other schools too, close to the port. Normal schools where lessons are taught in Wolof, the spoken language of Senegal, or in Arabic or French. These schools, in theory, are open to everyone. They're free or cost very little, but still too expensive for the poorest families. These students eat at home when school breaks for lunch and in the evenings, which is not the case for the young Talibs. They are typical local schools, but the children that attend can be considered fortunate. These neighborhood kids, their parents send them here. Each boy or girl lives at home with their father or their mother.
Ils dorment chez eux, c'est une queue, dans leur maison.
African Islam has its own capital, Tuba, a town considered holy in the middle of Senegal, some 500 kilometers from Mbour. A town of 1.5 million established by Sheikh Amadou Bamba, the founder of the Murid Brotherhood. The Sheikh is seen in this photograph taken in the early 1900s. Each year it's a site of pilgrimage for millions of faithful who gather where once there were just forests. Here the laws of Senegal carry little weight. The caliphs, the sons and grandsons of Sheikh Amadou Bamba, have ensured the town remains virtually autonomous. All that seems to matter here is prayer and a little bit of business. Tuba is always crowded, a fervent, passionate mass of people who proclaim their beliefs with enthusiasm.
Borom suba ngoon jërëjëf Serigne Fallou Mbacké nee na maay Sénégal maay xew tey maay xew ba foofu te duma xew yi xanaa xamoo ne ay jeex na rafle jeex na rakkal jeex na ragg jeex na pele jeex na mooy Sénégal gaal gi Sénégal gaal gi fii ci biir kër gi.
The black man was discriminated against during colonization and slavery. Africa belongs to us, we're the people of humanity. Sooner or later the world will realize it. Thank you, Marabout of Tuba. Islam and the Koran teach us how man should behave and to respect your neighbor. Because we know we are human beings. We're on earth for a purpose. And we shall leave it again, so it is useless to feel bitter, to hate. That's what the Koran teaches us. Why are the kids treated so harshly? So that tomorrow they can cope with the real world. The Murid religious leaders have built a mosque, a magnificent, imposing mosque. Over the years, the building has been extended. Today, the domes, minarets and prayer rooms spread over an area of several hectares, and no expense has been spared. This is rose color from Portugal. It was made for the fifth son of Sheikh Amadou Bamba. And over there, that's white marble from Carrara. I had wanted to meet the Caliph to ask his opinion on the Daras, where his teachings are frowned upon. He didn't meet me, but sent along a spokesman, a hermit, who lives far from the luxuries of the mosque in a run-down part of Tuba. In this ramshackle little house. Islam forbids it. These are not good people who teach and who beat. Beatings are not necessary. One must not hit children in this manner. In the future, one must take care of these teachers and very much improve their conditions, so they won't have to send out anyone begging in the streets. One of the sick boys is in a bad way. His injured leg is getting worse. I offer to pay for his medical costs at hospital, which Ibrahim agrees to. We leave early in the morning for a well-equipped hospital in Thiès, a town about 100 kilometers from Mbour. To get there, we use the local taxi service. In tears, we meet up with Ibrahim's father, who is the real marabout. He's in charge of some 100 children split into 3 schools. He's left his home in Dakar specifically to watch over the medical procedure. His leg is very badly infected, and we can see in his past medical history that he fell from a tree about 2 months ago. No, 2 years ago, 2 years ago. And it has never been looked after. He's had no care at all, so it's probably connected to that. But there's not much medical care at the Dara, as far as I know. Have you ever had children that have died because they were badly treated or because they didn't receive proper medical attention? I couldn't say, because I've never seen that myself, someone who was punished to death, but I have heard of it happening. The boy has recovered, even though his leg still hurts. He is still living in Ibrahim's Dara, under the absolute authority of the marabout. I'm responsible for many talibes, and I treat them as I would my own children. When they have children of their own, they will need to be able to educate them in the same way. Midday is an important moment for the children in Ibrahim's Dara. It's when the biggest meal of the day is served. They stop begging or working and bring home what they've collected. Food, including fish, a few coins, whatever they have. That's it? That's all you have? Open it all up. Those in charge carefully inspect the collection bowls. They pick and choose and keep the best for themselves, including the choicest food. Why is the food already cooked? It's the people in the neighbourhood. They give it to us like that. Go on, hurry up, wash your hands, quickly before eating, and sit down in groups. The morning session and punishment takes place at dawn. You can stop now. Come on, time to go begging. Those who are leaving later, stay here. The eldest boys in Ibrahim's Dara are getting ready to leave school. I'm folding my clothes and putting them in my bag. Someone will come and pick me up. Me too. He'll come and get me too. They are not going on holiday, or taking some days off, or even visiting their families. They're just following the instructions of the chief Marabout, who lives far away. He's decided that some of the boys should work his land 300 kilometers away, deep in the countryside near the border with Mali. The dry season is about to end, and the fields need to be tidied and cleaned before the rains come. They leave early and make for the bus station. It's a good kilometer on foot, and Ibrahim leads the way. Like everyone else, they'll be taking public transport. The kids are thrilled, happy to be on the road. Next stop, Koungheul, a 6-hour ride away. Koungheul is in central Senegal, deep in country. Just about all the children at the Dara are from this region, as are the Marabout and his assistants. They went to Mbour because that's where there is money to be made, but everyone appears delighted to be back in their home province. In Koungheul, things are very different from Mbour. No punishments, less verses from the Koran, and more outings in the countryside. The kids seem happy enough. The entire Dara heads out to the fields early each morning, near the forest of baobab trees. The fields need to be cleared. Every little twig has to be picked up, and the ground left spotless. Koungheul is a poor place, even poorer than the villages on the coast, and it is hotter here than elsewhere in Senegal. The Dara kids that haven't emigrated elsewhere find it hard to eke out a living here. We're looking for bits of metal, but we still haven't found any. Close to the Dara, a busy road, is the main highway to Mali. It's in poor condition, forcing the trucks and cars to weave between the holes or ruts. The Talibes fill in the holes and beg from passing drivers. He says, yes, every time they have some money, they take it back to the Dara. What are you going to do with that? He says he'll use the money to buy some shoes. The region has often suffered from drought. But worse still is the soil, which has been overused, and natural resources are often just wasted. As elsewhere in this part of Africa, the countryside is slowly being abandoned, and the price of food is rising. In Dakar, I witnessed demonstrations against hunger. Large numbers of civil servants and a few workers took to the streets in a generally peaceful manner. Among the men and women, education authorities worried, even scared, at the rise of the Talib phenomenon in Senegal. It's a catastrophe. I think the state is responsible to a large extent, because these kids should have been protected. They should have been educated and trained beyond the level of the Koranic schools. But unfortunately, that's not happened. They're left instead at the mercy of these dishonest people who use the kids just to make money. You've seen them in the streets. All they do is collect coins for the marabout, who just stays in bed all day long. So what can be done to stop it? The government. It's the government and the parents that are responsible. The parents shouldn't be allowed to hand over their sons to anyone just like that. That's what's happening. And it's also the poverty and the misery. It's all related, of course. Dakar has a population of about 3 million. It's a bustling capital and a magnet for those talibes who have decided to run away. Thousands do every year, runaways fed up with the constant beatings and by the difficulty of learning the Koran in the Daras. I went along with one team of medics and social workers that spends its days and nights crisscrossing town trying to help. The runaways live in the street. If they agree, and only if they ask for help, the social services can take them into care. But whatever the kids decide, the medics treat them and try to make life more comfortable. Leave me alone, you. It's my money, let go. You've taken 50 centimes, give them back to me. Stop, listen, I'll share it out. The former Talibs live in small gangs and, as before, beg for a living. But prayers and the Koran have long since been forsaken. Where was your Dara?
Tuba.
In Tuba. Why did you leave? Because they used to beat me. He hadn't learnt his lesson, so he was beaten. And how about you? Do you still pray? Do you still pray? No, I don't. And you, how about you? Nope. Nope. Does he remember some of the Quran? No, he says no. Can you recite a few verses? Nope. Isn't it hard living in the street? Yeah, sometimes it's hard to sleep outside. Why? Oh, because the big ones sometimes hit us. And then also it's cold, and then there's the places where we sleep, and the bigger boys attack them in the streets. More patrols, but this time in broad daylight. The social workers call it marauding. We head east, a few kilometers from the center of town. After months, if not years, in the streets, the fugitive Talibs eventually form small communities away from the main population. This is one such community in this slum, at the bottom of the gully next to an abandoned sewage works. The place has no name, but it's used as a dump. No one dares venture here other than the kids and teenagers who live here. Everyone seems to use drugs. The kids soak some tissue in solvent and suck on it for the whole day, a habit they call gints. What are you breathing in there? It's gints. I know it's no good, but it makes me feel better. Doesn't that make him feel sick? No. Hey, you see this? That's the President of the Republic in that picture. I left the Dara back there because it was too tough. If no one is there to help you, then you have to work in the fields and get beaten and insulted. I was told that I had to collect at least 500 francs, and if I didn't, I'd get beaten up. That's why I ran away. And the hardest part of living rough like this is when you sleep. The mosquitoes eat us alive. Hang on, let me speak. Sometimes at night, some of the smaller kids get abused by the bigger ones. Don't tell him that, stop it. No, let me speak. It's other kids like us that do it, only older. The social workers hardly ever go down into the slum itself. The van is parked at the top of the ravine, and those Talibs who wish to come and get medical care. According to the doctors, their numbers are on the increase. We've been coming here for about 1 or 2 months now. To start with, there were 5 or 6 kids, maybe 10 at the most. But now there are more and more of them. They're sheltering away from the locals, and in particular hiding from the police, who would force them to leave wherever they were. But here they aren't disturbed. They've mentioned that some have sex with each other. Yes, they've been talking about that more frequently. They're talking about it more openly now. At first it seemed some were being forced. Now there seems to be more consent. They usually leave here at meal times to go and beg where there are more people. I was curious to know what the Senegalese authorities intended doing about stemming this tide of street kids, as well as the Daras themselves. I was introduced to a Muslim intellectual called Rawana Mbour, the former director of the Islamic Institute, as well as an active member of an association set up to help the Talibes. Well, you know, Marabout is a label that people stick on whomever they please. It used to be a teacher, but over time the term has become a cliché. Nobody knows who's who anymore. The problem of the Talibs going out to beg will, God willing, soon be resolved, because the groundwork has been laid that should help solve this issue, if not in a brilliant way, at the very least in an acceptable fashion. The key is to remember that originally the Marabout was essentially a farmer. So the idea is to provide a small plot of land, which he can cultivate with his children, with his Talibs. In rural areas, this has been a problem that goes back many centuries. What he manages to grow and harvest will be enough to provide for his needs and those of his kids, the Talibs. After this interview, I left Senegal, but was to return several times, hoping to see some improvements, changes in behavior that would maybe be in line with what Rawana Mbour had been hoping for. What changes I did see were particularly noticeable in the countryside. In the rainy season, the expanses of grey, dry land had been transformed into rich gardens. Manioc, groundnuts and millet, all of it tended by numerous little talibes. It conformed to the somewhat idyllic image of traditional Africa, and an image that confirmed the crucial role these kids play in the country's economic welfare. The Senegalese countryside, it appears, needs these little farmers. He says they can work without the talibes. He says we might be able to get by without the talibes, but it would be a lot less productive. With their help, however, there is a much bigger crop, a larger quantity that helps feed the talibes too. The port of Mbour is as busy as ever, and the numbers of talibes seems to have increased. The Daras are still there, if anything, even more of them. Almost each house on the outskirts of town seems to be swarming with kids. He says he'll sleep 60 boys in there. They can all be put up there, he says. We're ready to take in any number of children. The demand is growing by the day. Ibrahim's Dara is still there. I witnessed the same scenes I first filmed several months earlier. And the same fear, too. The Talibs number between 50,000 and 100,000, according to UNICEF. 300,000 claims Tostan, a Senegalese NGO. Not all Koranic schools are as harsh as Ibrahim's. Daras like this one number in their hundreds, and few of the pupils will ever be able to find a proper job. Many will try to leave or continue begging. It is, after all, just about the only thing they have really learnt to do well, and the only way they've been able to survive.